Happy birthday, super birthday, happy belated birthdays in the past, happy future birthdays in the future. My name is Lime Green. Welcome to the Off Top Podcast, the podcast where you request for me to play games, and then I sit down and then I play them for the first time ever. I get to play, groundbreaking masterpiece games. Wowee! uh, and in this case, it's 5 Nights at Freddy's 4. Specifically, night 5, night 6, 7, and I believe night 8, and beyond that. In case you're tuning in now, for some reason you missed last episode and the episode before that for some reason, I talked about, boy oh boy, this game is super tough, and we're just going to be talking about the lore more so, because I did not get past night 2 and I got really mad, and this game yells at you, and for some reason I could get past like everything in FNAF 3, and I thought FNAF 3 was reasonable, and apparently that's not what the community thinks. I don't know, but I'm making up for that by looking more into the lore side of the game. We're also looking at the book that came out around the same time as FNAF 4, so we're going to be looking at the lore in the game, at the lore in the Silver Eyes, and we're going to be mixing and matching, seeing I guess what what really happened. The main thing of what I'm doing, I guess, is double checking the fandom's homework. I kind of have to pretend that I don't know who William Afton is for this. I don't know William Afton is purple guy, but I kind of have to go along and be like, oh man, where did they get William Afton as purple guy? What I do know is, after you beat night 5, you get perhaps the most iconic scene in all of FNAF 4, and perhaps all of FNAF. Crying child, he's on the floor crying, and the brother and his friends are there. They're all wearing FNAF masks, and they're like, oh man, your brother, he's kind of a baby, he's hilarious, let's pick him up and have him kiss Freddy. And Crying Child's like, no, please, come on guys. And then they're like, oh, let's pick him up and have him get close and personal. And then they pick up Crying Child, and he's fighting back, and then they take him close, and then was that the bite of 87? Now, people talk about this scene a lot. It's a meme. Of course, I kind of know with more knowledge about this. I have the foresight of later games, but I know people now know that it's not the bite of 87. I'm not sure how they know, but they know. Also, people talk a lot about the brother in this scene, but not so much to the friends. What's going on with that? If I had to bring one thing to the theorizing universe, I'd say, who are the friends in this scene? And why aren't they mentioned at all, or as much? Because they're essentially accomplices to some extent. Another thing you unlock for beating Night 5 is the extras menu, which gives you concept art and cheats and a whole bunch of other stuff. I think like a lost art, I've said this before, is cheats. You know, not too many games have cheats nowadays, but also concept art. You know, this isn't really a concept art. It's more of like, oh, this is how we've made the models for, you know, the animatronics and stuff. But uh, just like the behind the scenes stuff, I think it's really cool. And, you know, it kind of shows the vision that they wanted for this game. And yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Which, you know what? What else is cool? Night 6. So, night 5, you were up against Nightmare Fredbear. And previous nights, you were up against the Nightmare animatronics. Night 6 is just combining all of that. And if you can do all that, then it gives you a little cutscene. And it's like the crying child is back. And your little friend is there. And he's like, can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me. And your plushies are there. And they're like, I'm sorry. And one by one, they like disappear. And the foxy one doesn't have a face. And they're like, you're broken. We're still all your friends. And it's very, it has meaning in some way. And they're like, we're still here. But they're leaving. And they end with, we'll put you back together. And the crying child is crying like they always do. I remember when FNAF 4 came out, that was like a big thing. There's like, we'll put you back together. That was like a big phrase that was repeated back in the theorizing days. I think the thing I thought was like they're gonna turn them into a robot of some sort. I'm not really sure what I thought. Or put their soul into a robot of some sort. I'm not sure what I thought. But maybe that's right. That sounds more right than turning them into turning their actual body into a robot. You know what else you get for beating Night 6? Can you guess? Some more extras. Moving on to Night 7. Night 7, Nightmare Fredbear does not come back, but is replaced by a guy just called Nightmare. He actually talks, which is kind of interesting. Not really a first, I would say, for the series, because, like, Freddy, he'll just hum, and I feel like a couple other guys would, like, not really talk, but, like, make little sounds. You know, FNAF 4, it's all about making sounds, and you gotta detect who's making sounds and what's just background sounds. But you know, just kind of breaking the ice for, I'd say it's a sister location, not security breach. Because I know in the sister location, there's some talking animatronics in there. But Night 7, once you beat that, then you're taken to another pretty iconic cutscene where it's a box with 2 locks on it. You try and jiggle them around, and they never open. You can never unlock the box. And then a text box comes up, and it's like, perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now. And I remember that, like, blew up. People were, like, trying all sorts of combinations for the locks. They're like 1987, 1983. Let's try the years of this game's release. 2015. They're trying everything on these locks. And I know now, with the knowledge I have, that the contents of the box has changed from the Daco interviews. I believe wholeheartedly, and this is something I believe for since the game originally came out, I believe there was supposed to be some sort of contest or some sort of extra game. Scott loves to do these little extra games for charity or whatever, or something like FNAF World. He would release one of those games and it would be oh, here's a bunch of sequences of codes, and then the fans would have to be oh, let's try all these random codes, and they would have to put in all these codes into the lockbox, and then eventually that would open. I think that was originally the goal, but like Scott said, he was a little, what's a good word? He wasn't really sure how the fan response would be to what was in it originally, and then he has since changed it over time. I'm not really sure what would be in there or what it is now, or if it even matters to current FNAF lore. Speaking of current FNAF lore, let's talk about the most current FNAF lore we can while speaking about FNAF lore. FNAF 4 Night 8, also known as 2020 mode. It's just a really, really, really hard mode. And it just looks like a nightmare, emphasis on the nightmare part to me. And all you get is 4 stars on your title screen. So when your friends come over, you can be like, hey, look at this. And they can be like, whoa, man. That's cray. And that's it. And you have all the menu unlockables, and you can cheat your way to, I guess, the later nights whenever you want. You can look at all the behind the scenes stuff. That looks insane to me. I guess another thing I could discuss briefly is the Halloween update. I had also seen a little bit about this. It's just what's the best words to say this? It's just a bunch of Halloween stuff now in the room, and some of the animatronics, or new animatronics, like Nightmare Own, and they bring those back for new games. But Scott has said that this version of FNAF 4 is not canon. I'll put it in the description of this video. But he said he's working on, in quote, 2 updates for FNAF 4, 1.1 and the Halloween update. And he said the Halloween update is not canon. So, there's that. Alright, now we're going to move on to our next segment on our podcast. Take out your books, your Five Nights at Freddy's, the Silver Eyes, the graphic novel book. And we're going to go from chapter 5 to chapter 13 in our graphic novels here. And we're just going to summarize, theorize, and some other third thing eyes here in this graphic novel. Kind of see if we can put a cohesive narrative together between the book, I'm gesturing with my hand here, the book, and the game and see if something ties together here. If we can figure out who Purple Guy is, how the fans got the bite of 1983, not 1987, and who is Crying Child. Future Lime Green here to say, hey, I did some digging and I found out. Alright, I missed a couple things. So, in, I want to say, Night 3 minigame, there's a TV. And this TV is apparently really important because it shows there's an ad and it says 1983. And the community was like, well, 1983, does that mean that this establishment started in 1983, or does this mean, this entire game takes place in 1983? And what else? Another thing they got hung up on was, like, the bite itself, or like, because the bite's supposed to be, the frontal lobe, and it just looks like, in FNAF 4, just looks like the entire head. It's Atari style minigame, so I'm not really too hung up on that. But apparently Matt Pat did a video around the same time as FNAF 4's release, and Scott kind of debunked some of the long-standing FNAF theories that I totally missed all this. So one of the things I didn't even know this was a discussion. Like, they thought Mike Schmidt could have been Purple Guy, and Scott's like, well, this is why William Afton is Purple Guy, and then another thing was like 1983 or 1987, and Scott's like, it's 1983. So I'll also link that in the description. Now we're getting to a point where I need to link my sources in the description of videos. That's where we're at in FNAF lore. So I just want to add that in there. Now we're going back to the book report. So Charlie wakes up, and I guess it's been a couple days because she doesn't have bandages on her hands. She's recovered from falling on Foxy's hook hand, I guess. And check out last chapter if you haven't already. She's and this is weird wording. She's getting little snatches of time. She's remembering stuff. That's just a weird word. She's remembering her twin brother, Sammy, and how he could have been abducted, like Michael. And they used to visit Fredbear's Family Diner. They're just big fans of anything that has to do with Freddy Fazbear. And they go to the old Fredbear's Family Diner, and they discover that they weren't animatronics walking around. They were costumed people walking around. And that's basically chapter 5. It's a lot like now I need to say it, the first FNAF movie, if you've ever seen that. Speaking of FNAF movies, spoiler alert, chapter 6 is a lot like FNAF 2, the movie. The whole gang says, let's go back to Freddy's, and here we have this creepy night security guard, and he's like, hey, my name's Dave, and Dave has this weird aura about him, I guess. He's drawn with this, I guess, how do you describe it? This weird grin, And even when he's frowning, he's almost like grinning. And he just basically takes the whole gang through, and he's like, this is how you move the animatronics. And they look kind of more scared this time around. And eventually Dave goes off on his own and takes one of them. And they're like, in the panic, they run out and they're like, I guess nobody saw Dave and Carlton? And they're like, oh yeah, we saw a yellow Bonnie take Carlton. And again, this is kind of like a one-to-one from the FNAF 2 movie. You know, I'm pretty sure FNAF 2, the movie, just lifted straight from here. Where does the Scooby Gang go after Carlton gets kidnapped by a yellow rabbit? At the same time, Dave mysteriously disappears. They, of course, go to the police department. The police department's like, oh, that Carlton, he's just playing a joke with you. And then they go to Carlton's family, and they're like, oh, that Carlton, he's just playing a joke with you. You know, that's kind of like a recurrent thing in the FNAF universe, the FNAF-averse, if you will. That, you know, all the adults are kind of like, what's a good word? Like, lazy, I guess, is a word. Incompetent is another. Just not really paying attention. That's the best phrase. And also, Charlie gets another snatch of like a time when she was a child, and I want to say it's Endo 01 question mark? Just sneaking downstairs and scaring her? I'm not sure how this is all going to tie together, but, you know, this is FNAF. Alright, so Chapter 8's probably the most busy chapter thus far. Carlton's family finally snaps and calls the police, and the police show up, and what do you call this guy? Would you say he's Springtrap? I guess Springtrap just comes out and gets the jump on the police, and they don't, like, one guy, yeah, just one police officer shows up looking for Carlton, and Springtrap takes him out. And then, I'm not sure if I mentioned this at the beginning of Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes, the graphic novel, but they make another allusion to, I've heard of this, the fourth closet. I'm not sure if Charlie is in that story. I know each book is kind of like a different story type deal, but I know of there's a book called The Fourth Closet, and I'm not sure any more than that. And then what else happens? Oh, yes. Charlie talks about how her father was killed, possibly, by what I said last chapter was Endo 01. Now, I say possibly because in this panel, we do not see the body. And that could just be, you know, this is, what is this, like I don't think there's a rating for books. I was trying to find a rating for books. You know, this could just be like, oh, you know, rated PG-13, you know, you can't show a bloody knife and a bloodied body at the same time, you know, one of those deals. But it could also be, you know, oh man, he really is alive type deal. Also, I've heard mention, in addition to the fourth closet, I know that there are theories that this man right here, I'm pointing to him in front of Fredbear's Family Diner, that Charlie's father could be Henry Emily. Now, I'm not sure where that name comes in, but, you know, flip to the next page. My dad had a partner. This says there were joint owners. Henry Emily comes up a lot, and later, more discussions down the road, and later, theory crafting videos. I know that, but so far, all I know is Charlie has a father who had a partner who says they were joint owners, and he could possibly be dead. Chapter 9. Carlton wakes up. He's in a Springtrap suit, and then here comes Dave walking in, and he explains just like everything about spring lock suits. And then he mentions what I was mentioning last chapter about perhaps the existence of Henry, and he just name drops Henry out of nowhere. So I was right. And I guess I want to use the word assuming, but not really assuming. I watch videos, so I just kind of copied answers. Everyone else shows up, but they would have seen the police car out front, right? And been like, oh man, the police are here. And then, you know, they should have like, I'm not sure, because the police car would have been locked. I would have said like, take the police radio and been like, hey, call for backup or something. I don't know. I feel like they could have done something with the police car. And they each like kind of split up, do their own thing. And meanwhile, Carlton, he's still in the spring lock suit, still trying to not like set off the spring locks. And not only does Carlton have to worry about the spring lock suit, Golden Freddy just shows up out of nowhere. And that's how the chapter ends. Chapter 10, they notice that Bonnie is missing, and they were like, well, can't do anything about that, I guess. And then Charlie's like, hey, there's Carlton. Let's go save them. And see, now here's a little, I guess it's not a nitpick because they're down below the little animatronic area. I was gonna say, like, why? They say it's dark. Can't they turn on the lights? You know, they can manipulate all these other controls. Why can't they turn on the lights? I guess, you know, they're not near a light switch or a power box or whatever. You know, I guess you win this time, FNAF. Charlie has to maneuver away from Bonnie. It's a whole chase sequence. And then finally, Charlie gets to where Carlton is trapped. Charlie gets the spring lock suit off with her knowledge from her father, I'm assuming here. And Carlton kind of explains like what's been going on, and he then surmises that he thinks Michael is in Golden Freddy. Now, here's my question. What makes Michael more important? Because Golden Freddy is like the big thing. You know, he's got special powers that the others don't, why is he more important than the others, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Why was he chosen to be put in this body? I don't know. And also, I was wondering, I'm assuming this is William after me. It's gotta be. But why did he kill the police officer outright? And then Carlton, he just stuffed him in in a springlock suit. You know, why didn't he just kill them both, or just put them both in springlock suits? You know, is he? Did he just want to tell people about his springlock suits? Well, they're not his. They're, you know, Henry's. You know, I guess he's taking credit for them. He just wants people to talk to, I guess. If you thought things couldn't be more kooky, get ready for chapter 11. Alright, Foxy and Chica, they start chasing people around. Security guard Dave, he starts chasing people around, but they say, enough of that. And they just hit him over the head with a baseball bat. And they say, well, that's that. And they say, well, should we drag him back, make him testify for his crimes in a courtroom setting? And Carlton, he's just so bloodlusted, I guess. He says, why don't we just put him in one of those Springtrap costumes? It's like, Carlton, calm down. And they were looking for Michael. Michael's not where they think he is. Instead, they find the dead cop, I guess. He's lying in a parts bin. And I guess none of them saw the police cruiser outside. And they're all shocked. And they tie up Dave and just splash water on him. And they're like, hey, we want answers. Eventually, they figure out Dave won't communicate until he gets his mask. And they eventually go along with it and give it to him. And he becomes very cooperative once he gets it. They're like, hey, why are the kids' souls still here, I guess? And they're like, hey, as long as the kids' souls are tied to this mortal plane, they will forever be in their own happiest day. And, you know, they don't recognize me as like an enemy because, you know, I'm wearing the mask. You know, I look like just another animatronic. And they see you guys as the bad guys. And chapter 12, by the way, they, of course, don't believe them. They're like, that sounds crazy. And at the same time, the police officers are like, whoa, what happened to our other police officer? And, you know, it's been like 40 hours since we sent that guy out. And Foxy is still chasing after Jason. And it's a whole rigmarole. Rio managed to get away and hide from Foxy underneath the table. And then the table lifts up and Freddy is just standing there menacingly. But then John, he comes out of nowhere and he tackles, just a flying tackle across the room into Freddy's shoulder. You gotta give respect to him. Like, that's an excellent frame there. And then they all manage to get away, trying to escape. And then, Chica's here. They're at a dead end. And then Charlie climbs up, grabs like a wire out of the ceiling, and electrocutes Chica in the process, like electrocuting herself a bit. It's like, props to John. But, Charlie really took one for the team. So they run past Chica. Back to Foxy. Foxy's still there. Foxy was just trying to figure out how tables work. What's that frame? Looks like Charlie's picking up like a pizza cutter or something. I'm not really sure what that is supposed to indicate. Foxy manages to smash some glass, cuts up Charlie's hands, and this is like flashing back to the cold open we had at the beginning of the book. And then John comes out of nowhere with a flying kick. All right, I gotta give more props to John. Like, holy, a flying kick across the room, and then a flying headbutt earlier. Like, you're no Charlie, but you're pretty cool. Everyone else is like grouped up in the center of the room. I guess all the other robots are recovering. And it looks like it's curtains. Get it? Curtains, It would have been more funny if it was like a play instead of like a stage play. I'm not sure what you'd consider FNAF. It looks like it's curtains until, Carlton notices Golden Freddy just standing off to the side there. And he's like, Michael, it's you. It turns out Foxy wasn't trying to attack Jason. Foxy was only trying to protect him. And then everyone turns because Carlton's father has just broken down one of the walls of the pizzeria. And he's here with a sledgehammer slung up on his back. It's like, holy. So everyone's like, okay, time to go home. The fun's over. But not yet. Because Dave, the security guard, just grabs Charlie by the back of the neck. He's like, you're staying. Carlton's father's like, absolutely not. I have a gun. And Dave's like, I will kill this one right now if you don't do what I say. But Charlie, Charlie's an OG. Charlie's like, if you want to become a ghost so bad, why don't you just become a ghost? And then just activates the spring locks. And Dave's like, Kya! Arg! Grr! Twitch. And they just all, like, walk away. And then the animatronics come out. And they drag him away into the back room for FNAF 3. Chapter 13, the last chapter. The police... It opens with the police chief asking, hey, Charlie, don't you want to visit the hospital? And Charlie's like, I just need a change of clothes. Like, Charlie, I know you're, like, the realest of the real. But, the fight's over. You can relax. You can, I don't know, like, go to the hospital. Have some of the hospital food. It's not all that bad. Like, chill out, Charlie. You're not Captain America. Eventually, Charlie and Dave end up at the cemetery visiting two gravestones. I'm guessing it's Michael and her father. And she gets like a flashback to her father in front of Fredbear's Family Diner. And there's like a crow here. I've been stuck on this crow imagery. Like, it shows a crow flying away and then like pecking at the ground. You could say like it also shows Henry looking at the crow seemingly before it pecks at the ground. So it shows flying away, looking and then pecking. And then Henry's like smiling. Maybe it means, because crows symbolize death sometimes. Maybe it means like death is leaving. I don't know. And then death comes back because the crow's pecking at the ground. So, the cycle of life and death, something. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the crow could symbolize. But that is it for the Silver Eyes. So I guess all that's left is to reminisce about it and give my final thoughts. First, I think it's important to acknowledge what time this came out. This came out like 2015, 2016-ish. And at that time, there was not really any definitive way to seek out the lore besides the games. And the games, they're kind of vague in their ways they explain the lore to you. That's why you gotta seek out YouTube videos or outside sources. So, in that aspect, I think the book fulfills its purpose pretty good. Now, from a storytelling perspective, I think it's kind of strange how they keep wanting to go back to Freddy's. We don't really see them too much outside of Freddy's. Besides the breakfast place, the diner. I would have liked to see more outside Freddy's. I know that's like a weird want, a Five Nights at Freddy's outside of Freddy's book. I feel like my biggest complaint was there's just too many characters in the group. You had your standouts. You had Charlie, John, Carlton, Jason. But then the rest of the group, I feel like you could condense a little bit. What were they really doing? Really? In big group chase scenes, you had 3 people running over here and 2 people running over here. It kind of felt unnecessary. And then maybe it was just the graphic novel, but I did not see one mention of William Afton. He kept the name Dave from beginning to the end. I'm not sure why that would be, unless I missed it somehow. I'm not sure, but yeah. Okay, now we need to have a very specific segment because did I think I could get this video out before Five Nights at Freddy's 2? Perhaps. Did I go see Five Nights at Freddy's 2? The movie? Perhaps. But are we going to discuss Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the movie? Perhaps. So let's discuss Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the movie. I thought it was very much like the first movie in that it was very faithful to all of FNAF in general. I am much more of a marionette fan now. I especially like the water section in the tunnel where the ghost hunters, I guess you would call them, were exploring, and he fell in there with thousands of little marionettes in the water. That was really cool. I thought the part, if I have to nitpick, where they're exploring the city was kind of strange. They held them back from exploring in the second movie, but in the first movie they had like Golden Freddy exploring the town. So that was kind of strange for me. That there was even a limit on them. It was a nice setup for the third movie. FNAF adults continue to be incompetent. I thought that was nice. Oh, and another nitpick I have. I appreciate the makeup and the wardrobes and whatever for when the people get possessed by the marionette. But I'm not like a super big fan of the possession itself. It seems like, I don't know, it just doesn't jive with me. It's like, the marionette is an animatronic taking over like a human host. It's like, something about that is like lost in translation to me specifically. I don't know. Might jive with someone else. I thought the idea of having Fall Fest, but Faz Fest was neat. Guys, Fall Fest in a movie that people would be like, Fall Fest? Doesn't look like autumn. What else did I like in this movie? I feel like I'm talking about the negatives more so than the positives. The segment where they essentially had Mike being the security guard from FNAF 2, where, you have no doors, and they make reference to that. Like I said, the FNAF movies, they pay attention to the fans, unlike, well, maybe Sonic, but like, besides Sonic, any other movie franchise, game movie franchise ever. That's a weird sentence. Oh, one thing I really wanted to discuss, and I can't believe I almost forgot it, was Circus Baby is in this movie. Like, as a flashback that Vanessa has. And that makes me think, okay, Circus Baby's probably not going to be in FNAF 3. But if they make a FNAF 4, which I'm guessing is a high likelihood, okay, who is going to be Circus Baby? Because Circus Baby is, I think in the lore, it's supposed to be like William's daughter, right? So, is that going to be Vanessa? Or is that going to be Abby? Now, I have no idea. Like, I was thinking about this earlier today. Like, either way they go on this, it's like crazy. Like, it would be crazy if they introduce another like sibling for Vanessa to have, which, why, I don't think they would do that. Like, already in this movie they introduced Michael, and he's gonna have to become the purple guy, but not that purple guy, the other purple guy. I'm not sure what you would call him. I've only made it up to FNAF 4. But I'm not sure. I want to say, if it comes down to it, they would put Vanessa in Circus Baby. I can't see them doing Abby, because Abby's like a main character. And I can see Mike being like, oh man, my girlfriend's a robot. I can see that more so than I can see, oh man, my sister's a robot, Been a while since I've seen the first movie, but in this one, Abby acts like Chica's like her favorite. I don't know, that could just be me misremembering, but all the voice acting Matt Pat, Megan Fox, Kellen Goff, I believe his name is. They're all pretty good. Toy Chica gets like way more lines than anyone. Uh, and even like the little cameos and stuff, that was pretty good. The end credits, yet another Living Tombstone song. I get that. I understood that reference. You got wait until the end credits to hear like the secret message, which again, it's pure cinema. FNAF is all about like little Easter eggs and I want to say decoding stuff. It would be cool if it was like a secret message at the end, but you know, the cinema critics, they're already tearing this movie apart. You don't want to put like Morse code or something in the movie. That would be like that would tear them apart emotionally and physically. A few more things I want to touch on before I wrap up this segment. The scene in which Vanessa is going around taking toys out of this box and turning on like TV, making it staticky, and all that, so she can go into the dream and then confront her father, all that. Apparently, the box that she takes the stuff out of looks very similar to the box from FNAF 4. The very box that I said earlier in this very video we're never going to see the inside of. Which is crazy. I was watching this in theaters and I never saw it. I don't know. I was paying attention to something different. I was watching a different movie. I don't know. So that kind of lines up. People are already saying, they're like, what if, the reason why Scott said, the contents of the box changed was because, the contents of the box did change, but like more stuff was just added. The victims' belongings were just added over time, more and more victims. That kind of makes sense. I'm not 100% on board, maybe like 75%. The other thing I want to touch on, Charlie. It sounds like Charlie is the puppet in this movie, right? And we just talked about Charlie is in the Silver Eyes. So Charlie's like the coolest character in that book, right? Now my question is, how could Charlie be the marionette / puppet? Are they two different things? I'm not sure. But how can that be? If Charlie is alive? ? Unless the Silver Eyes takes place. Because if Charlie is the first one and the book is telling me, Charlie's running around doing stuff, meeting the animatronics, Charlie can't be the first one. Something's gotta be wrong here. Unless there's two Charlies. That's my other theory. There's gotta be a Charlie and a Charlotte or something. I don't know. Okay, so remember a little while ago how I said, boy oh boy, it would be sure nice to play Atari games in the modern day. And FNAF World doesn't really count. Into the Pit doesn't really count. I'm talking like retro Atari style games. Well, boy do I have the right game for you. Segue from FNAF into Atari 50. Now this is a specific game released in 2023, I believe, and it's like an all-in-one package. Now, I am not really into Atari games per se. I'm more like all about like learning about them. Like some of them are kind of good, I found out. Atari 50 is, if you don't know, it's like a almost like a museum of like they walk you through, and it's like it has like interviews too. It's like this is a game, and then they show you like Breakout or something, and they're like they have interviews with the devs, and they're like, this is what we're thinking of when we made Breakout. And then they have like posters of Breakout during the time, and they have like pictures and reactions and like all sorts of crazy stuff. And have like all sorts of crazy games that some of them are like, all right, like I get it, and some of them are like actually like diamonds in the rough, and they have bunches of like unreleased games as well. Now I will say this has been like a standout release for me. Like Yar's Revenge was like, whoa. Like I had never heard of this game before, but now I'm like, there's a video that went out like a while ago, and I was talking about like games that should be in a museum, like a Hall of Fame, and I put Yars in there. Spoiler, just because like they won me over. They convinced me that Yars Revenge was that impactful, and I later got Yars Rising. Atari talked me into it. Now I will also add, Atari 50 has 3 DLCs. I got them all. They're titled The First Console War. That one was pretty good. It contains more unreleased games, more I guess behind the scenes interviews, and pictures and whatnot, more games you can play. The second one is Wider World of Atari. Contains more of the same. And then the third, which came out not too long ago, it's called the Namco Legendary Pack. Now I will say, I think they dropped the ball a little bit on the Namco Legendary Pack. I feel like it released specifically for Pac-Man's anniversary. I was kind of let down by this. I was looking forward to the Namco Legendary Pack, because like I felt like there's a little more they could do. I don't know. I felt like they had Dig Dug, it had several versions of Pac-Man Atari, and they had interviews with Pac-Man Atari Pac-Man. Why am I saying it like that? Atari Pac-Man's developer. But I don't know. And I forgot to mention, just Atari 50's base game, like some of the original developers, they were tasked with the task of making like new versions of the original games. So there's like Breakout, but now it's like Atari 50 version, modern day Breakout, and you can play that also. And then there's like Yar's Revenge, but now it's like super cool Yar's Revenge. And then there's like all sorts of cool versions, and you can unlock some of them. There's like Haunted House, but you can play that in like Atari, like old version, and then you can play like Atari 50 super modern day Haunted House, and it's like, what? Have I convinced you to play Atari? Have you played Atari today? I was writing out my like top 100 games of all time. And it's a lot harder to think of than I thought it would be. And Atari 50 somehow made it on there. It might bump itself off, but again, I really like this. If not just for the interviews and the museum aspect, the DLC kind of messes with that because it doesn't slot in there perfectly. Without the DLCs, it went from like, oh man, the beginning of video games to like the downfall of Atari. Nintendo's really kicking our butts. And then you get the DLCs and they're like, oh, let's talk about the things we really couldn't talk about because of copyright problems. We really couldn't talk about Atari Pac-Man, but now we can. And then it's and then it sits in its weird little area in the DLC pack. It's but that's Atari 50, and that's FNAF 4, I guess. Thank you for joining me on this wonderful adventure. Until next time, we do FNAF Security Breach or FNAF Sister Location or whatever. Bye-bye.